Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Mark Rosell, Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government that hosts the Michael Hayden Center here at George Mason University. And since this is an all George Mason University event, students, faculty, staff, alumni, I don't have to do my usual presentation on who we are and what we do here at the Schar School. But we are very delighted that you are here to be a part of this wonderful event. And actually, it is the inaugural event of this decade for the Hayden Center, so there we go. We plan to keep it going for many, many decades, so thank you. And I would like to, of course, acknowledge our founder, Michael Hayden and Janine Hayden, who are in the front row. And thank you, Sue Gordon, for being here. We're honored, and your husband, Jim, and that was a very delightful dinner where we got to talk very candidly, and she said, it's just the same when I'm here. So it'll be, I think, a very wide-ranging and very candid discussion. So thank you for doing this for us. So I would like to introduce the director of the Hayden Center here at the Schar School of Policy and Government, Larry Pfeiffer, to make a few opening remarks. Larry?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, I promised Mark I'd keep it to 20 minutes. So thank you all for coming out, particularly on a rainy day. I really appreciate it. Just a couple things wanted to mention, some administrative notes. This event, Sue has been gracious enough to come here and hold this candid conversation for your benefit. It's an event that has been set up to be exclusive to Schar School and GMU. So as you're participating in the event, we'd ask you to kind of avoid your phones for now. Don't go tweeting things out. Don't go putting stuff on social media right away. If you'd like to take some photographs, if you'd like to put something out on social media saying that Sue was here and what a great thing that is for the Schar School, we'd love you to do that. Thank you very much. Haven't been here, we haven't had a Hayden Center event in a while, so I got to apologize a little bit for that, but there's been some administrative issues around event registration that have slowed us down a little bit. For those who aren't familiar with the Hayden Center, we do have a website. We're on social media. We got a YouTube channel, lots of great events we've held in the past, many of which are still incredibly relevant, so check them out. For those who haven't been paying attention to your email, we got a great little arrangement going with the Cipher Brief, National Security Intelligence related website. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to take advantage of the free subscription they are offering you. It's a $120 value subscription that you can have through your time at the Schar School. So just send an email to hccipher@gmu.edu, or just go check out our website, and we'd gladly hook you up with that free registration. And for our grad students, if you'd like to be published, they have also offered us an opportunity to put student opinion pieces on their website. And we've had one Schar School student, John Hoffman, already write a piece about the geopolitics around Libya, very well received. So if you're writing a paper for a class and you think, I wish more people than just my professor would read this, great opportunity for you to get your name out there and a great addition to your resume. So again, reach out to us and we can get you the details on that. Question and answer session will commence after we talk for about 40 minutes or so. When that starts, Michael will let you all know. You'll just need to line up at these two microphones over here, and he'll just call on you, kind of alternate back and forth. Please introduce yourself, and then also be as succinct as possible. We love to hear you talk, but we don't need to hear you talk for a real long time. There is a reception following the event. It's for everybody in this room, so please do come by the reception afterwards, because there's going to be plenty of food, plenty of drinks, and it might be an opportunity for you to have a personal conversation with Sue or Michael or General Hayden, myself and others about things that may interest you that don't get addressed here today. Introductions, Michael Morell. I think many of you know Michael. He's been senior fellow to the Hayden Center. He's now a distinguished visiting professor to the Schar School. He's teaching his first graduate level class on analysis. I think some of his students are in the room here today. So we really appreciate Michael coming here. We're the only faculty in existence, I think, that has a former director of CIA and a former acting director of CIA on its faculty. So I think that speaks volumes about the school here. We have Sue Gordon. talk a little bit more about her. Sue was sworn in as the 5th Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence in August of 2017. That's a very big title, doesn't fit on a business card, so affectionately referred to in the community as the P. Diddy of the intelligence community. It's the number 2 position in the community. She served honorably for 2 years and left the position last August and then retired from government this last fall. But she had a storied, legendary career before that. She served as the Deputy Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency from 2015 to 2017. Got a lot of great acclaim for the transformative agenda that she was driving alongside the Director, Robert Cardillo there, that really changed what NGA is today. She spent 27 years at CIA before that, has the distinction of having served in senior positions in all 4 of the then existing major directorates, including as the Director of Support and as CIA's leader in all things cyber. Made her early splash in the late 90s, helping to stand up an organization known as In-Q-Tel. Sounds like something out of a James Bond movie. But In-Q-Tel was and is today a private nonprofit whose mission is to bring innovative technology to the community in as rapid a manner as possible. And it took the rest of government about 20 years to figure out that was a good idea, and then you've seen other departments set up very similar enterprises since that time. Not only a champion of embracing technological change, Sue's also been a big champion for diversity and inclusion within the Intel community. She is in a very small pool of females to have attained this very high position in the Intel community. And so I imagine she might be able to answer some of your questions about gender issues, about the inclusion of people of color in the intelligence community as well. Sue's education, just to show you that you don't have to necessarily be a public policy student to work in the Intel community. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in zoology, something having to do with the mechanics of zoology. I don't want to ask. And she attained that degree at Duke University, where she also has the distinct honor of being the only person to have served 3 years as the captain of the women's Blue Devils basketball team. She can tell you lots about Duke, but if anybody's following the Duke-Florida State game, she doesn't want to know anything about it because she's recording it at home, so keep that to yourselves. I will say the last event we had coincided with the 7th game of the World Series that Washington Nationals were in, and we somehow still filled the National Press Club auditorium, and we managed to keep the game a secret from most people before the event ended. Since she's left government, Sue's received some great recognition for the accomplishments of her career. An organization known as AFCEA Intel Committee is bestowing upon her the Charlie Allen Award for Distinguished Public Service. The Intelligence and National Security Alliance, INSA, has announced that she'll be receiving the William Oliver Baker Award for contributions to national security intelligence. These are both awards that General Hayden has also received in the past, so she joins good company there. Most recently, she was named a Senior Intelligence Advisor to the Intel and National Security Alliance. But most importantly, and I told Sue I would mention this, she was named one of InStyle magazine's 50 Badass Women, which is their list that celebrates women who, quote, show up, speak up, and get things done. So with that, I'd like to welcome both Michael and Sue to the stage. Thank you.
I think what Larry said is I'm old. Hey, y'all.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Larry. So this is really special for me.
Me too.
We started the same year at CIA. We grew up together. We took classes together, training classes together. She was always better in the training class than I was. We played basketball together. And I didn't know when we first played basketball, I had no idea that she was a college basketball player. And she is a badass basketball player, let me tell you. But I've worked with her for a long time. I think the world of her. When she was named the #2 in the national security in the IC, I could not have been prouder. And it's a great opportunity to be up here with you.
Thanks.
So let's start by talking about the importance of intelligence. So we both started our career during the Cold War, and that intelligence had a certain importance. Then we had a decade where we weren't quite sure what was happening. And then 9/11 happens, and there was a significance to that. And now we're in a different world, right? There's great power conflict, rapid changes in technology. Talk about how important intelligence is today, in specific terms, but also relative to history.
Yeah, so thanks, General Hayden. Anytime I get to sit in a center that has your name and sit in front of you is a good day for me. And Tom, thank you so much for having me here at the Schar School. And Mike, you know. So two bins. Historical context. So I think we're in what I'm going to call the third epoch in threat environments. The first one is the Cold War, where the threat actors were nation states. Soviet Union was the one that dominated. I know when Michael and I started, I was in an office of 780 people. 779 of them did the Soviet Union, and one guy did China, and he also did the rest of the world. But it was the governments had there were nation states, governments held the information. We built intelligence systems to go get the information that governments held and specific collection systems. And our consumers were pretty much policymakers and warfighters disproportionately. And our analysis was also disproportionately political and military. First one. The Berlin Wall falls down. You said we didn't really kind of wandering around the wilderness, but we were still applying Cold War collection systems to a proliferating world. We still were going after the information that governments held. We were still going after it with the same thing. The problem was we just didn't have the installed base. So we were applying the same methodology. We were the same people trying to produce the same analysis, but we didn't have the same foundation. And so that's why you see those years after the fall of the Berlin Wall until 1999, we're still organized much the same as we were in the Cold War. We're now trying to apply those same theories to a very distributed world. And I think we could talk about the successes and failures. 9/11 happens. Now, non-nation state, individuals hold the information. Our consumers are, yes, policymakers and warfighters, but they are allies, non-allies, and state and local. So not only do you have to go get the information in a different place than it was held by individuals, and so you see the rise of cyber, because it's their communications that you're trying to find the information, and you're trying to learn how to form alliances differently than the traditional means. Now we're in a third epoch of ubiquitous technology, digital connected, and data abundance, where the world knows everything. We're not having to hunt for information anymore. And so all the threats are to and through information, and so we're in a third change. But we're still dragging the Cold War organizational construct and the 9/11 construct, and we're trying to figure out how to fit this new world. So world change, that's a historical context. One thing that has been constant is that intelligence is about, colloquially, knowing the truth, seeing beyond the horizon, and allowing leaders to act before events dictate. You agree that's what we've always done. That's what we're doing today, and I think you could imagine that that is a necessary craft all the way into the future. You can't imagine a future where that craft wouldn't be valuable. Do you agree? And intelligence isn't just about knowing more information. It is about having a tradecraft around being able to deal with fundamentally uncertain information with certainty. It is never opinion. It is always craft around how you see and observe events and inductively draw a conclusion, draw a generalization, rather than having a theory and trying to prove it. And there's nothing different about today from when we started or at any point in the future, except what? The environment in which you're trying to do that. And and who has the information, and how you go after it, and pesky privacy laws, and pesky digital connectedness, and what is truth today, and what the hell is the horizon that you're trying to see beyond, and who are the leaders that are making the decisions that you're trying to inform. And if I look at it today, all of those things have changed, to include the leaders. Would we all agree that CEOs of companies are making decisions that are affecting global security? Should intelligence inform them? Right? So I think that's the most interesting thing to me in a world that has just exploded in terms of connectedness. In a world where the answers are known by kind of the ethos. You still want that clarity, but how do you go get it when most of your rules were designed physically?
So the world has changed.
Yep, world's changed.
And the intelligence community, like every other institution.
Same mission.
Right?
Yep.
Is a little slow to adapt.
Right.
So what
But still necessary.
What do you think the fundamental changes that we need to make as a community so that we are effective in the future?
3 things. I'm going to prove I can give a short answer. One, we're going to have to figure out how to use unclassified information. So our history is collecting information as we decided to collect it. So it had a heft, and we had confidence in the data because we were essentially curating it. Now we need to use open data, but we need to be able to use it with confidence. So one, you got to use open data. And you got to be able to use open data not as a nice to have, but integrate it with all the others. The second thing is we got to get better at doing economic analysis. Because a digitally connected world is fundamentally an economically driven world. And you can see it in so many things happening today where alliances are being tested by economic realities. Yes, I want to be partners with the United States, but China is offering me a deep water port. And so being able to understand those things. And we have a president that sees the world more economically than just geopolitically. And there are good reasons why the intelligence community is not as steeped in those things. In others, where's the information held and whether we believe we can go after it. So that's 2, we got to get more economic. And the third thing is I believe we're going to have to write unclassified products.
Because the customer base is changing.
Because the customer base is changing. So my challenge is our business isn't secrecy, our business is national security, and that the people who are affecting national security are either the populace, they're being influenced, or the private sector, they're making decisions that affect security. How do we, the national security apparatus, give information to the decision maker? And that is a big change, right? That's not a casual change. That isn't giving our products to something else because they're very different crafts, and so you can't be casual around it. So those are the 3 changes I think we're going to have to affect.
And you pushed these things when you
I
were
did.
deputy. And how far did you get, do you think?
Using unclassified information, I think we got a long way there, but the systems just aren't in place for it to be able to be considered in the stream of analysis, and there's so much of it that concurrently you're going to have some data analytics and processing. If you want to go with AI, you can, but you're going to have to do it. And that is hard culturally because of the inherent uncertainty in making analytic judgments. I always get, will you allow a game? Just so you understand intelligence analysis from an intelligence analyst. Raise your hand if you like doing jigsaw puzzles. Awesome, keep them up. Do you like doing jigsaw puzzles if you don't know the picture? Keep them up. Do you like doing jigsaw puzzles if you don't know the picture and you know you only have a quarter of the pieces? Do you like doing jigsaw puzzles if you don't know the picture, you only have a quarter of the pieces, and the president wants to know what the picture is in 5 minutes because he needs to make a consequential decision?
So for the people in my class, I did not pay her to say this.
Right? And so intelligence is about how do I construct something around that so that whatever quarter of the pieces I have, I can allow them to be considered legitimately. And so in a world where the world has all this information, I want more to be considered legitimate. We're going to have to use machines to do it. But that is hard when analysts will tell you, well, I just know. Right, or just history, right? And so the big conundrum on artificial intelligence is this notion that that's okay, humans are always going to be in the loop. No, they're not, they can't. Because if they have to be in the loop, they're not going to be able to see all the things. So I think that's one of the big changes is, so yes, include unclassified information, man, put that into the stream, that's a hard one to do, so some there.
Do you think there's still
economic, I think we're making good progress on economic. I think we are. I think this president has forced that. I think using economic pressure and trying to provide this president with the kind of intelligence that he wanted to make the kind of decisions he wanted to do has really advanced our craft in that. And on the producing unclassified, I think there's some really good notable examples where we've seen the benefit. The 2016 ICA, which was unclassified, that was telling the people who were affected, American citizens, you're being influenced. Giving the power to someone else is a notable example, but that's still hard for us.
I also think there's a notable example. Go to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency's website, and you will see all sorts of unclassified analysis
it's
out there.
unbelievable.
It's really cool. And they will actually allow you to do some of the analysis.
They will. I mean, just over the past 5 years, and I give credit to my previous boss, is this notion of succeeding in the open, and that is that this is a perfect example of government. This thing that the government collected at great expense could be used openly in areas like disaster relief and understanding the Alaskan tundra and so many things. We're taking this historical bolus of data and making it available for scientists to use is really remarkable.
Okay, so with this large number of national security issues out there, what can't we get wrong? What do we absolutely have to get right going forward from a national security perspective, the intelligence community?
I'll go from a national perspective. We need two things going forward. We're going to have to figure out how we trust our communications and how we're able to ascertain what's true. Right? Those are, and so if then the intelligence community is disproportionately expected to be able to operate those, we're going to have to be drivers of those two. But the world has figured out how to use the digital environment in order to advance whether our adversaries or our competitors' interests. They've figured out how to advance their interests in the relatively ungoverned, massively, instantaneously, zero-cost world of data and data manipulation.
And those two things are linked, right?
Right, they are. So what we must get right is trust and truth. What intelligence community needs to do is be on the driving side of how you ascertain that, without longing for a simpler time and only looking in the historic places for information because the information is being held in many other places than where we historically looked. And you still need intent.
So Sue, you were, I'll switch gears here a little bit, you were the number 2 in the intelligence community during a very unique time, the presidency of Donald Trump, right? And I want to ask you some questions that kind of flow from that. So you were asked by the president to be the number 2.
Yes. I was his appointee.
You were his appointee, and you knew a lot about him going into that. Mm-hmm. There were the Never Trumpers. There were the things he said about the intelligence community during the transition. There's a lot of stuff going on. Did you have to think about saying yes, or was it, I'm a soldier, I'm going to salute and serve my country? How did it, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I don't think I had any hesitance at all, right? And I think that's a little bit intelligence officers have. I used to talk to a class and say, if you took all the cabinet officials standing around an open field with Hunger Games style, with all the departments and missions in the middle, everyone would race for intelligence, right? Because there's a purity in intelligence. All you have to do is pursue the truth as hard as you can. All you have to do is present it as clearly as you can so that good decisions can be made. And because you serve the Constitution, as I've told the President, my love of country covers you, you're going to work tirelessly to try and provide information to the President, regardless of who it is. In my case, I think 7. I don't know how many you served, but I served 7 presidents. So that's a no-brainer, right? Career intelligence officer. The number 2 is the career intelligence officer. The number 1, the DNI, is typically, Jim Clapper was an anomaly, oftentimes a political appointee. Easy call, right? And yeah, because you're trying to give the best information for the best decisions.
Second question is Dan Coates, who was the DNI.
And by the way, I would say that any time, for most people, your president asks you to do something, I think it's a pretty brazen person who says, yeah, I'd say no, right? I think that's hard, but in intelligence, it was easy.
Dan Coates, DNI.
Yes.
Number of times, walking in, you said it was 4, but a number of times, he spoke up publicly and spoke truth to power.
He did.
Did his job.
Absolutely.
Is that something that he had to consciously think about? This is a moment where I need to speak out, or was it happenstance?
No, I think one of the things that Dan did, Dan's a tremendous patriot who answered his nation call several times. And one of the things I think Dan did really well is he understood the ethos of the intelligence community. He embraced what we were, which is kind of relentlessly responsible. You know, he said it, seek the truth, speak the truth. And I think he carried that mantra. And so I think he did it well. I think he didn't try and cross into policy. I think that allowed him to say it. And the 3 or 4 times that he spoke publicly, many more times than that in policy settings, but 3 or 4 times publicly was when a statement was made that had 1 or 2 characteristics. One is impugning the integrity of the intelligence community. You just can't stand for that. And then the second is, like, we can be wrong till the cows come home, but not wrong motivated, wrong-headed. And then the second is misstating what we need to be true, right? So you see the Putin examples, and you see the things around election security. Those 2 things typically, I really do think it was only a handful of times that he made a public statement where he just needed to clarify what the intelligence community said. And he did it pretty non-pejoratively. He just came out and said, corrected the record. And I think what that did was 2 things. I think we have kept the intelligence, and I think the current leaders have kept the intelligence community by and large with their eyes in the boat. And the second is just establish that there are certain conversations that you aren't going to be able to say about the intelligence community.
Yeah. And then the third question is your own experience those last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right? And, having gone through Benghazi, I know, as well as anybody, that it's not fun to be in the public domain with people saying things about you that aren't true, taken out of context.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that was for you, number 1, and number 2, what did you learn from that?
So just in case you all don't spend your whole life looking at the career of Susan M. Gordon, I don't know why. You might do something other than that. But the day came in the summer where Dan Coates was no longer going to be the DNI. Statute said that the principal deputy would become the acting DNI. And that was the path we were on. And then in a tweet on the day that Dan's resignation was announced, it became clear that there was some question about whether I would be acting D&I. Over the course of 2 weeks, it became clear that I wasn't going to be acting D&I. And so we had a problem because statute said I must be, and the president clearly no longer preferred that I step into that role. Two things, personal. One, if you're the third child of a naval officer and the man that appointed you decides that he doesn't want you to continue, one of the things you do is a cheery aye and you give room for something to happen. The second, for me, it was I didn't want to be another source of rub between the president and the intelligence community. All right, it was a tough enough relationship that, imagine this, I'm going to fight it out and say, no, you must have her. Well, that would become another thing. And what was most important was the president got intelligence. So on a personal level, that was a relatively easy call for that reason. On the other half of the person level, notwithstanding those discussions privately, I then became, and that event became a nail for other people's hammer. Right, where that event, depending on which side of the political spectrum you came on, I was either evil incarnate deep state, who clearly must be gotten rid of, or, right?
A great intelligence professional.
A great intelligence professional who had stood up and given truth to power. And the problem was, I didn't want to be anyone's agenda. And so for me, the most difficult time was to somehow keep my own bearing. Be true to what I think the craft of intelligence is, which is to keep intelligence in the president's relationship and allow that to happen, while allowing people who have no idea who I am to say things about me that were completely ridiculous. And so there's some really interesting moments when you're in extremis and you try and figure out who you are. And I would just tell you that when you find yourself in those circumstances, you've got to just navigate it for yourself, because a lot of people will tell you what to do. You just have to do it. So to me, it was one, I knew how to handle the moment, even though there's still an uncertainty that I have of why that was in anyone's best interest. The other piece was then I became news and used for whatever side of the argument you wanted to be on. And for an intelligence officer that pretty much spends their life being a humble tin-bender, that was odd.
Yeah.
It was odd. It was odd personally.
Yeah. So when you gave the president your resignation letter,
Yep.
you also gave him a personal note.
I did.
I'm not asking you what it said, but why did you do that?
Well, they released it. So I mean,
Yeah.
the White House released the note. So this is so great. One, I will just tell you all, anything you write and anything you said is written and said. So just be careful about what you put down. So my resignation letter, I wrote, because I had 3 messages I wanted to send. Number one is, I was honored to serve. When I did my confirmation hearing, my opening line was, I love America. I love being part of the process that our founders envisioned, and I was honored to serve the President of the United States and lead the intelligence community. So I wanted to send that message. The second was, I wanted to say, I am letting you have your team. Because that's, to me, what it felt like for some reason he had decided he wanted a different team. But the real message in that resignation letter was for the intelligence community that said, don't worry. Because if you think about it, Dan's a political appointee. These guys come and go. My worry was the intelligence community would see a careerist go and think, oh my God, did we not get the memo? And what I wanted to do in that note was to say, don't worry, one, Mr. President, the intelligence community still got you. And the other was for the intelligence to say, don't worry, you're all you need to be. You didn't need me to be here in order to do it. So that was that. The handwritten note, it was so funny. I had decided it was time that I needed to deliver that letter. I was down in my car to go down to the White House. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what if I can't get in to see the president? That would be rude if I just dropped off a a type letter, I should dash off a handwritten note just to not be rude. Like my parents raised me up right. Don't be rude. And so, in fact, I didn't get in. And so the note to the president was just really intended to say, you don't have to do this, right? If you decide that for some reason you don't want to, I'm not resigning because I'm trying to get away. I'm giving you room and being respectful. If that's not what you want, don't do this. So these two iconic things were actually notes to both communicate to the president and as much to communicate hope and confidence to the intelligence community, because I didn't want them to think that just because I was moving on that the relationship was broken.
So how do you think, Sue, how do you think the intelligence community is doing standing up to the political pressure?
I think it's hard. I think on the one hand, you can't judge anything by not seeing the intelligence community in the press, because the intelligence community does its job not in the press, right? I've got no data that there aren't the exact same assessments being made, briefings being given, involvement in the policy apparatus being owned. So on the one hand, I don't think you can overjudge because you don't see the same toing and froing. You were never going to see, I think one of the great things about the DNI's position, and especially the DNI carried out by Jim Clapper and Dan Coates, it was trying to be that overwatch so that it took the heat so the intelligence community could do the work. And so I don't think it's surprising that you don't see Gina out there being really vocal, because that isn't where it is. But I do think that what we've learned over time is national security issues spill out into the public. They affect the public. And I don't know that I can't think of a time that the leadership hasn't spoken up, but I think they're going to have to be ready to speak up, because every once in a while you have to correct the record. You always have, and I suspect you always will.
So I'm wondering.
I think it's harder. It's so much more partisan.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. It's not as different serving the president, because every president is the same because they're different, and every president wishes intelligence could say things that it can't, and every president is vexed by intelligence because we steal their decision space. But the environment in which that is playing out, both administration that feels under siege and hyperpartisanship on both sides, every action that the intelligence community thinks is just data actually turns into agenda. And I don't think you can wish that away. I think you have to be ready to also make sure that you're clear about what you're saying.
And then let me just ask you to put two recent data points
Sure.
into that context. One is the apparent reluctance of the intelligence community to do an open hearing for the worldwide threat testimony, right? That's one. And the other is the DNI and the director of CIA standing at the State of the Union and cheering during what were absolutely clearly political moments.
Let's see.
Do those two things trouble
So
you?
what was the first one? Oh,
Worldwide threat testimony.
no, I think the intelligence community hated open hearings, just in general, always has. Because it's such a bad forum to be able to naturally articulate threat. Because the real grit and the foundation for much of its assessment lies in classified information. And so it's an awkward forum to be compelling and complete, particularly when the environment one is of challenging those conclusions, right? Because it's just a difficult setting, because you can state things openly, but when you're challenged, it is hard to defend openly. And so it's just a tough thing. So the intelligence community not wanting open hearings, and again, I haven't been involved in the conversation, but that doesn't surprise me, because it's just a really tough one. And especially as partisan politics kicks up, the disadvantage and the chance for misspeak or the chance for misunderstanding just increases exponentially. So I wouldn't put too much on that. Although I would say, back to where I started, I do believe that the American people are involved in national security, and you have to be able to have a conversation with the American people in 2020 and beyond. And so however that's going to happen, I think intelligence is going to have to figure out how to do that well, whether that's open hearings or not. On the State of the Union, so just remember, it has not always been thus that intelligence officers have also been cabinet members, right? Not in every administration that's true. And so
Bill Clinton it was, George Bush it wasn't, Obama
right,
it wasn't.
Right, and so I would say that of cabinet officials and of people trained in speaking publicly about their craft, intelligence officers are still babes in the woods, right? We're just kind of, I will call us rubes in that regard, where it's just not, if you're an Air Force officer, you are trained, if you're in the military, you are trained in terms of being able to have open conversations about your stuff. That is just not where we've been. And so I think you still see us growing as intelligence officers, learning how to behave as part of the policy and political community. So if that was a misstep in terms of standing up and not, I put it more in the category of being caught in a situation that's like, oh, I don't know how to play this. Do I stand up for the Tuskegee Airmen? Do I not? And so having had no conversations about it, and my want is to always find the least sinister conclusion, I would just say it's just another example of growth of intelligence into the public arena and having to navigate openly the world of policy, which historically you were able to put your stuff out there and then back gently away.
And then one more question about this environment. And you and I have talked about this.
Yes.
Which
We've talked about almost
which is, a lot of formers, including two right here.
Yeah.
Right? Writing, speaking.
Yeah.
Thinking we're helping you,
Uh-huh.
right? The DNI and the intelligence community.
Yeah.
How did you see that? Was it helpful or wasn't it? You can be honest. We've talked about this before.
I have. So one, private citizens get to say what they want to say. So, period. Two, we in the intelligence community have long benefited from surrogates explaining intelligence, which is a kind of particular thing to the American people.
We were talking about the Snowden example.
Oh, yeah, the Snowden example is a great example where when Snowden happened and the press was just merciless, basically making it seem like he was the hero exposing massive misuse of the Constitution, which is nothing further from the truth. The intelligence community didn't know how to speak about it, so we, like Benghazi, thought the answer was don't give fire oxygen, just say nothing. And so what that meant was only one point of view was going out there. And so Mike Hayden jumped in, and if you go back in time, he basically showed our way out of that, refuted some of the most hyperbolic statements that over-extrapolated what we were doing and brought it back to reality. And so we have long benefited from, particularly as more intelligence issues became open, benefited from it. That said, in this environment that is hyper-political, that same intention to both protect our community, right? Because it was hurtful, some of the things were being said. And we weren't fending off every challenge. You were trying to both protect the women and men of the intelligence community and talk about realities of geopolitics as you saw it. But in this hyper-political environment, one of the effects that I saw was that it exacerbated a belief that the intelligence community was political and had a political view. And so what weirdly happened is it imputed, not to you, but imputed to us, that we were all partisan. That if these recent leaders had a view, that it must be that that was a pervasive view of the intelligence community, which we would all tell you, we all have views, but they don't affect the work we do. And the second thing it did was it took away people we could turn to have a voice when we needed a voice.
Fascinating.
And three, I think it's part of the reason why I don't have a job, is because I had worked with all these men, supported them. And so that must mean that I am what they are. So, I don't know how that nets out, but I do think that that's, I don't think you could do anything about it. Well, the one thing I would say to my former colleagues is, thank you for defending our integrity. And you didn't have to worry about our ability to do our job. We knew how to do our job.
One more question before we go to questions from the audience, and that is, you have a lot of students here who are thinking about careers in intelligence.
Yeah, you should do it.
What advice would you give them?
No, one, you should do it. Yeah, no, seriously, I was asked in another fora, because I think there's just this kind of pervasive, oh my God, it's all such a mess. It's, what are we going to do? You're the people that are going to find our way forward. Being able to see with clarity what's happening and then figure out how to present that in a way that's useful is more necessary now than ever and more elusive now than ever. There is less installed base. There is more to be figured out. There are more pieces of data that can help you. And there are more domains in which national security is going to be affected, that if you want to have impact going forward, this is exactly the right time to go into it. I think this is an incredibly exciting time, if you're as optimistic a human as I am, and two, to step into this craft because it's so necessary and so elusive. Like, don't we all want to be pioneers at some level? Like, it's no fun if ever all the answers are already known. This is a time where very few answers are known. You could be it. So leap into the fray. The second one is, this is a technical world. Everyone, in 2020 and beyond, everyone must be technically competent. This digital environment demands that you understand how technology works. I'm not saying everyone has to be a technologist, but you must not leave that to somebody else. That has to be part of economics and politics and government and international law. I mean, just looking alone at data rights and privacy. If you don't understand how it is technically instantiated, I don't know how you're going to understand the way through it from a legal or policy construct. And yet we must, because privacy has to be protected, but we have to be able to communicate. And so both those things, one, do it because we need it and it's interesting as all get out. And two, make sure you are not technically averse. And if you are a technologist in this room, for goodness sake, get yourself into social sciences classes, because the same national and international interests are being affected technically. So it's just not what the technology could do, but how it is going to be used that's going to make a difference.
Okay, so we've got two microphones. So we'll go back and forth between the microphones. And if you could,
Unless you're only at that microphone,
exactly. I was thinking
which
that.
we will not give Sue a break by just open air.
So please state your name and ask a question, please.
Hi.
Schar School. Very quickly, the credibility of the IC. If you could address that, please, in an environment where there's what's on it.
Can you guys hear it there?
Yeah, I can hear it.
We
And
can
if
hear it,
you'd
but it's
like,
not on.
I can repeat the question if that will help or Michael, you can repeat it. giving me more time to answer the hard questions.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So my name is-
credibility that I see,
Right.
given.
Given there's an increasing use, as you mentioned, of unclassified information, coupled with the increasing challenge of maintaining security on sources and methods.
Right.
And in addition to the decreasing faith the United States public might have in the Intel as an institution. The second question actually regards the cultural relevance.
That's going to be my doctoral thesis. Okay, keep going.
The cultural relevance of AI programming, especially in areas that we're trying to use AI where there is not a lot. I study Africa a lot, and the use of AI in Western settings is one thing, but adding cultural relevance to have AI appropriately utilized and appropriately scanning information in
Right.
areas that are not data rich.
Okay.
Credibility of the intelligence community. If you believe my premise about what intelligence is about is seeking the truth and speaking the truth. I agree that it is more challenging to know that, and just as challenging as any institution to not be biased by the things you used to believe, but rather continuously see anew. So I think there are technical challenges to the craft of intelligence, but from a credibility perspective, I think the institution still has integrity about what it is trying to do and how it prosecutes that. I think that there have been challenges, the Snowden and the 702 and all those challenges, to make sure that we are being true in how we implement the special trust of America in our collection systems, I think is still something that evolves every day. But I don't worry about the credibility of the organization. I do worry about its ability to continue to do its mission as well in this really explosive area of data. And then have the same confidence that it can put a wrapper around that data that it used to put around a much smaller set of data over which it better have control. So I think there are technical challenges to the craft of intelligence, but I wouldn't put that in a credibility perspective. I just think that that's difficulty. The second question is cultural bias in AI, relevance in AI. I think that's a really interesting question. AI is much further along in terms of utility and decision-making than we presume it to be. It is still relatively narrow domain, answering relatively single questions. So your issue about relevance, I think, is important. When you get down to privacy is a really good example of something that is very different culturally. Right, what we mean by privacy, but truth may be the superset of privacy, where truth is more about can you guarantee its pedigree rather than you can assure its conclusion, may be a way to get around some of the cultural issues around it, surrounding AI and cultural differences. But we're further away in terms of really employing it in decision-making than you might think.
Where?
Ma'am, thank you for speaking. My name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Also
Can
an
you
analyst.
turn the microphone on?
Should be.
And I'll try and answer in tweets.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
So I was curious if you could speak a little bit about what you see the future of the intelligence community as geopolitics continue to change and different agencies are doing a lot of the same things. If you see the future of the IC to be more mission set based or geographically based, and depending on how you answer, how you see the future of collaboration between agencies to break down stovepiping while maintaining legitimate compartmentalization.
That's a really good question, and I don't know. The way the intelligence community, or the way I interpreted what the intelligence community was trying to do, was to rather than fight the battle of organizational restructuring in the sense of getting rid of an agency or collapsing things, my view, based on the work of my predecessors, were if you made the data available universally, that the missions would evolve to use all the data, and then new structures would arise around the use of data, and that would be a much faster way to get the integration than fighting the legislative battles of whether this agency or not. So I think the future of intelligence is around making sure that data can go wherever it needs to go, and the cost of integration of data is zero. The next frontier, and I think the intelligence community is on the way to that, and you already see it. Now the challenge is, to your point about making sure that you just don't turn everyone into a generalist where I can get all the data so I have all the opinions, is you're going to have to work really hard to maintain craft. So NGA is a great example of something where now geospatial information systems and geospatial intelligence is something that is openly available, but NGA uniquely understands its tethering to the science of the earth. And so that craft still has a home, even as the data can be broadly used. And I think you're going to go to see that across the board. The next frontier for intelligence is breaking down these barriers of who gets to use it. The military and intelligence community is a great example. So if you think about how the intelligence cycle now happens now, you have requirements, you do tasking, you do collection, you do processing, you have distribution analysis, and that is all serial. And we have systems built against that. Yeah, that's just moving too much data, taking too much time with too many organizational barriers. And so we're going to have to figure out how you get data all the way to the edge, how you take more humans out of some of that processing so it moves faster, but you still have the sanctity of the data. And so breaking down organizational barriers across departments, not just part of agencies, is still hard.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wilbur Rivera. I finished
Wilbur.
my Master's of Public Policy back in 2018, and I can't seem to
So
let go.
old.
Yeah, I can't seem to let it go.
Me neither.
So I have a simple two-part question. It's
What is this with two-part questions?
well, it's about
Ask me my favorite color,
career-oriented.
Duke blue. Okay, there
Yeah,
we
it's
go.
not a policy. It's not an intelligence question. It's more
Okay.
of a personal career
Okay.
question.
Okay.
And what do you think are the top 3 qualities that you need to succeed in the intelligence community as an intelligence officer? And can you describe the time that you failed in your career and how you recovered from that?
See, top three things you need: insatiable curiosity, belief in craft. And what I mean is, particularly early on in my career, I got given a job where my ability to talk good was taking me to places much beyond my foundational ability. And I actually had a boss that moved me back into a job that I hated, and learning how to do that craft actually propelled me to the rest of my career. So I would say having a craft, knowing how to do something is really important. So curiosity, have a craft, and it hardly matters which craft it is, you just have to know how to do something. And the last one is learn how to decide. Remember the example I gave you about the jigsaw puzzle? That last moment, when you decide what something is, whether that is we're ready to build a program or I'm going to make an analytic judgment, always involves a leap. And learning how to make that leap with confidence is something that I think I had that I would tell anyone is the most important piece. The time I failed a lot. The time I most remember failing was really early in my career. I was given a huge job. It was awesome. And I I'm going to say I misunderstood the job was. I was asked to figure out how to build a new kind of collection system. And I was given a lot of money in a short time to figure out how to do something well, really early in my career. And I came up with a great solution. I completely missed working the budget, the policy, the politics, the collaboration. And so just on the day that I had this brilliant solution, just on the day a company had successfully come up with an approach, I was told it was never going to happen because I hadn't taken care of all those other things. So to me, my earliest failure was when I misunderstood what really makes things work. And it's all the other factors. So for all of you who have an idea, ideas are awesome, but ideas aren't what distinguishes how can that idea happen, right? How can I have that outcome? And so my biggest failure early on was I was so focused on building something that I forgot, oh, you wanted it to work. And I hadn't taken care of any of the things that made things work.
Thank you.
You bet.
Please.
Ms. Gordon, my name's Lauren. Thank you, thank
Lauren.
you, Michael, too, for your service. I appreciate it. So I have an 8-part question.
Okay, I'm ready. Michael, right up your alley. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3.
So I've heard from quantum computer experts that within 10 years, a quantum computer will be able to break algorithmic code, algorithmic passwords. And since you're a technologist, I was wondering if you could just speak to the quantum computing and how that's going to affect our intelligence community and our economy and way of living.
Well, if the in a world of data, the one that can master it is the one that's going to have the chance for massive advantage, and quantum computing has the ability to deliver advantage, either in able to put more data together to find answers, or the ability to break anything that we now have that protects information, and both of those are elements of advantage. But to take a technology and to put it into use. So I think quantum computing and compute is going to advance, and we're going to be able to do things with data that we couldn't imagine before. But I also think along the way we will figure out how to govern its use, and that its use is more limited and more directed than we now imagine it being. So yep, we can expect compute to be able to make the world transparent, and then you'll still have to make the same decisions about interests that you have. And so my same comment about how are you going to put that into effect? How are you going to govern it? What are the rules and norms? Will all come back into play. So I don't see any technology that takes that kind of effect out of play, but it will certainly change how you're able to use data for advantage. And if you have one who has it and one who doesn't, you're going to be at a disadvantage for a while. But I'm more hopeful. The world is so transparent technologically. Technologies and just the way science moves, the way scientists talk to each other, that I'm more hopeful that as the technologies arrive, all will be able to have access to it, and we will come up with the counters at the same time we do it. What I'm less confident of is we will have the governance around it. Because our governance, back to my admonishment, could you please be technical? Because if you don't understand what aspects of national interest that quantum computing can unlock, allow, or disadvantage, you're not going to be able to know how to construct a governance around it.
Let's do one more question.
Hi, my name's Justine
But it will
Capone.
happen.
I'm an international
But not in 10
security
years. Not in 10 years. Longer than that. Longer than that.
My name is Justinian Capone. I'm an international security studies department. Hello. I was wondering, in this era of disinformation, where it's being pumped out, by foreign governments and groups within the United States and cross between the two,
And advertisers.
and advertisers. So, what do you think is the best defense, for the United States going forward?
Informed populace. if I were going to take the technologies around data, I would, and I had free rein to write checks for the government and invest in R&D, I would spend R&D dollars around AI assurance, protecting our algorithms so that we could trust them. And then the second would be on using AI to be able to ascertain what's true from what's not. Wouldn't it be awesome if when you pull up Google News or whatever you pull up, it had a little dot by it that said, I've done a temporal analysis, and based on that, this is likely to be untrue because instead of spreading normally the way information does, it all appeared at the same instant, and that is unlikely to be true. So I think I really am on this trust and true piece for open societies. I really am concerned that unless we do something like that, more controlled societies or totalitarian regimes will look like they are offering an advantage, will look like they can make sense out of this chaos. It will seem attractive for someone to say, let me help make that all make sense to you. So I think the open societies have to find a way to use technology to enhance our ability to ascertain both trust and to ascertain what's true will be important.
Thank you.
So I get to ask one more question.
Yes, sir.
Which is when I wake up in the morning,
Yes.
the world looks pretty bleak to me.
Yeah.
The world and our own politics here, but you are so optimistic.
Yeah.
Whenever I talk to you, why?
I think it is because as I see the world, we're focusing on a conversation about this moment, about whether this moment is good or bad, whether this country is well led or not, whether these decisions are well grounded or not. And with institutions that are looking at some of those things saying you're doing it wrong. And while I think those are both interesting issues, what I think is much more interesting is this world is changing in a way that we can't long for a simpler time. And that it's a world that just needs to be solved just like it has been solved so many times before, just like it was solved in 1947 and just like it was solved in 2001, that there's a piece of me that instead of being focused on this, and I agree this is daunting. I mean, I'm a casualty of this. But what I see in the middle of that is a really changed world with different forces acting on it, where our system is much better positioned to both find a structure that works because we're open and competitive, because we have discourse and we have the ability to have universities where we have different views of how to do it, that if that's all we have to solve, well, we've solved that over and over again. And this doesn't seem so daunting to me because that is something that we have seen before. Even if, with all my hubris of all my years, I can say it's different than I've ever seen, but we have seen different before, so I tend to be optimistic about solving that.
So I hope you've all got a glimpse into why I so loved working with this person for as long as I did. Sue, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you all. Come to work, do it.